Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my review of the author backlist of Emily St. John Mandel. For the past couple of years, I've been making author backlist videos for the adult fiction of Meg Wolitzer, and I was finally ready to move on to a new author, and I decided on Emily St. John Mandel because Station 11 is one of my favorite books. I absolutely loved it. I put it in my BookTube Top 10s tag. I find it to be rather moving on several levels about interconnectivity between humans, past and present, and a beautiful elegy for the wonders of the world we live in now, a testament to holding on to human civilization even in the darkness, as it were. There were a lot of beautiful micro and macrocosms, like how we start with a small production of a Shakespeare play and a small scene in it, and then it just balloons in the post-apocalyptic future or dystopian future into a traveling Shakespeare show. It was lovely. I really should read it again. Instead, what I've mostly been doing is trying to read read-alike books. And so from there, I finally decided I should pay homage to Mandel's backlist, even though I figured, based on descriptions, that they wouldn't really be very similar to Station 11. But I figured I should at least give her the courtesy of reading the books and seeing what I make of them. But as a sum up, yeah, I didn't really find these books to be anywhere near as compelling as Station 11, but they were still an interesting exercise. And I read them in reverse publication order, starting with the last book that she published pre-Station 11, and then ending with her debut novel. So here's the first book I read by Mandel this month. This is the Lola Quartet. It's basically the story of a young man's search for his former high school girlfriend, who he recently learned might have given birth to his kid. But what the story really evolves into is a mystery about what happened to his girlfriend Anna after she ran away from home, and the type of mess she got embroiled in that followed her for the next 10 years. This is my second favorite book, I guess, of the three that I read. I really liked protagonist Gavin. There are sort of wannabe PIs or real PIs in all of Mandel's books, and you will always see a character wearing a fedora, and in this book it's Gavin. But I think what I liked the most about it with Gavin is how he was trying to recreate a past that doesn't really exist. Like, he thought he'd either be a newspaperman or a PI, but he was thinking of like old noir films, and ultimately his newspaper career kind of goes bankrupt. Another thing I really liked was the setting. He spends most of the story in Florida, which I think was just brilliantly drawn. I felt like I was right there in those swampy suburbs. And in general, I thought the plot was decent, good. I mean, following Anna's travails and her decisions after she got pregnant, it all kind of made sense to me. I think the backstories of the characters, I think there was some nice dimension to them, because the Lola Quartet refers to Gavin's jazz group with Anna's sister and two other guys, and we follow them and what happened to them, post-high school, and a lot of it's rather depressing stuff, or, people not exactly living up to their potential, as it were, but it still all relatively made sense to me and made for interesting character studies, while a mystery unfolds about sort of a nefarious figure who Anna met in her travels, trying to track her down because, well, let's just put it out there, she stole some money from a drug dealer. So yeah, it didn't, blow me over the moon as far as storytelling went, but I thought it was a good read, a fun read. Next, I read The Singer's Gun, and I think this one might be my favorite of the three books. This follows the story of Anton. In his more or less present life, he's a middle manager at a corporate company. It's a job he's sort of weaseled into. He has a shady background. His parents deal in stolen antiques. They have a store where they sell them. And then his cousin, Arya, has a forged passport and social security, business for undocumented immigrants in the U.S., which Anton is involved with for a time, and he actually is kind of decent at the job, but then he decides he wants a more normal life, really. He gets tired of sort of all the shady talk and back dealing, I guess. Except he doesn't actually, go to school or anything for his normal life. He forges a Harvard degree and that sort of thing. So ultimately, when his company has extensive background checks, he's found out. But he isn't fired outright. He's kind of put into like dead storage 4. Kind of reminded me of Milton in Office Space. But he's put there because another detective is on the case, because Arya's been getting involved in more nefarious dealings than, forged documents. There's reference early on in the book to a shipping container of Eastern European girls, and one of the girls has died. And so, it's kind of big stuff that Arya's involved in, and the PI thinks that Anton might be involved as well. And in fact, he kind of is, because even though he doesn't really work for Arya anymore, she sort of ropes him into doing this final assignment for her, and he, on his honeymoon, goes to the island of Ischia off of Naples, and he's supposed to get a package there and then hand it off to someone else. But Arya ends up stringing him along for weeks, and he pretty much abandons his wife and lives on this island. And I'm already debating whether or not I should say this is my favorite, because there are some plot conceits I didn't like about this. Anton's fiancée/wife, Sophie, is just a weirdly melodramatic character, and there didn't seem to be a very explored reason for it, other than just the needs of the plot. I mean, the backstory of them is that, like, 3 times in a row they scheduled a hall for a wedding, and then she got cold feet and backed out. And probably maybe more believable is her ultimately leaving him after he decides, I'm just going to stay on this island forever. But just all of her actions in person are a little bit questionable. And then there's the issue of the title, The Singer's Gun, which refers to basically a Chekhov's gun situation where Anton is able to get this gun off of a random person he meets in Italy, which is later of use to the plot. But it just made absolutely no character sense to me why this singer would have abandoned her gun with a complete stranger, especially after such a big spiel about why she needed it for her own protection. It just seemed like Mandel really put it there for him to grab. So I might already be suggesting that actually the Lola Quartet is my favorite. The thing that really drew me to this story is Anton and his wandering, if you can call it that, because he doesn't actually go many places. He just is sort of stuck in Ischia, thinking he can't really go home because he knows he's in deep trouble at his job at Dead Storage 4. And that, the police might be onto him based on what's going on with Arya, and that his marriage has already fallen apart. So he doesn't necessarily want to be in Ischia waiting for this transaction, but Arya's paying him a lot of money to do it, and so he stays. And within this framework, I think Mandel is probing what it means to disappear and what it means to travel in a way where you can disappear. There's sort of a nostalgic quote that she uses at the very beginning from a New York Times article by Michael Pye. Escape has become a problem in itself. A travel book without danger to the body, to the soul, or the future is entirely out of time. We stand in need of something stronger now, the travel book you can read while making your way through this new alarming world. And Of course, this leads into Anton wanting to write his own sort of travel book, sort of about living off of the map. And this reminded me a bit about Station 11, because Station 11's dystopia is basically a new alarming world where everything that has defined us as a postmodernist society has sort of gone to the wayside. I should mention another subplot in here has to do with Anton's secretary slash girlfriend slash one of his customers who he gave, forged passports to, Elena. I feel like that relationship and that subplot worked a fair bit better. I like how both Elena and Anton were looking for something in New York, basically looking to have better, in different ways, lives than they had at home, because Elena came from like the way north of Canada, from a small tiny town, and she was looking for a more vibrant life, but she ends up flunking out of school or leaving school, and then her visa runs out, and that's why she's undocumented. And then Anton, could have gone a more legit route, could have really gone to a real school and gotten a real degree, but instead decided to forge it. So I like how, they want these lives for themselves, but they're kind of attempting to take shortcuts. I don't know, maybe it's something about imperfect characters that I like. And, the law catches up to both of them, so. But I just think it made for a good backdrop for their relationship. Although Elena is also involved in trying to frame Anton for the PI who, is trying to track him and Arya down. Anyway, I guess that's most of what I have to say about this book. I still liked Anton and Elena and commentary on getting stuck in an alarming world, as it were, in their specific circumstances. I didn't really like some of the side characters or, this plot device. But to end on, this is the book I've been angsting about in my Friday Reads videos about the cat and its transcontinental journey. And I gotta love Anton's relationship with his cat, and that his cat was successfully able to make the journey from New York to Ischia. And finally, I have Mandel's debut, Last Night in Montreal, which I have to say is undoubtedly my least favorite of her 3 books. This is the story of, well, I don't really know. That's one of the major big problems about who the focus should really be. I feel like Mandel is saying the focus should be this girl named Lilia, who was abducted by her father from a small town near Montreal when she was 7, and they spend the next 10 years sort of traveling from city to city or town to town in the U.S., trying to stay away from, well, of course, a PI and Lilia's mother and so forth. I think she's supposed to be the center of the story, I guess. She's this enigmatic character who writes in hotel Bibles, "I wish to keep vanishing," and has this sort of desire, I guess, to disappear, even though she writes her notes in Psalms about loneliness. In the present-day plot, she's an adult who is still traveling randomly from city to city and town to town just on a whim, even though everywhere she goes she meets people and is involved in like friendships and sexual relationships and all of that. And most people she doesn't seem to care about and leaves on a dime. I mean, most of these people are just background names. None of them, those relationships are really developed or explained. The real one that's kind of developed is the one in New York with Eli. He's this guy kind of living in limbo, working on a doctoral thesis on dead languages, basically, and is fascinated by the idea that most of the world's languages will go extinct, and he tracks down, all of these random ethnic languages, and particularly focuses on words that don't have easy meanings anymore, like in English or what have you, to try, and it kind of gets into, in a fascinating way, really, how it explains these cultures and these ideas that are not as prevalent anymore because there are no words for these ideas anymore. I found that kind of fascinating, and that again ties into Station 11, I believe, in the idea. I mean, both of these ideas of a vanishing world is Mandel's eulogy to our postmodernist world and our dystopian future. And it also, she tries to tie it into Montreal and the idea of the vanishing French language there and how desperately the people there are trying to hold on to French and to the exclusion of English to some degree. Like there's derision directed towards some people who only speak English. One of the characters is fired for speaking English on, a store front floor rather than French. So she's trying to tie that in. This is where the novel kind of starts to fall apart, I think. I mean, the real thing I think that makes it fall apart is Lilia. She's just mostly defined by an absence. I think Mandel tries hard to make her enigmatic, but mostly her backstory is about her existing in the margins and not having much of an identity rather than wanting to disappear, kind of, and also having amnesia about what happened with her mother. But at the same time, I feel like Mandel put way too much stock into that because, most of her life and all of this stuff that she's experiencing is stuff with her father and not this secret whatever with her mother that's, disclosed at the end. I feel like the real story of fathers and daughters in this book, in a way, is the one of the PI and his daughter Michaela. The PI, Christopher, is brought on to Lilia's case when she's about 11. And then for largely unexplored reasons, Christopher becomes obsessed with her and leaves his home for months to ultimately years on an end, trying to track her down even after she's a legal adult. Sometime when Michaela is a teenager, her mother finally walks out on the family. And Michaela is basically left alone. And of course, there's this parallel between Christopher trying to find this father-daughter duo, where Michaela's relationship to Christopher, her father, is defined by absence and defined by Lilia, because Michaela starts going through his files and gets obsessed with Lilia as well. I feel like there was a more emotional gravitas in Christopher and Michaela than Lilia and her father. But there are some weird quirks in that relationship too. Like Mandel makes Christopher and his wife into former circus performers, and that's largely unexplored backstory. It just feels like she put it in there to be quirky and put it in there for Michaela to want to be a tightrope walker like her mom, and it just makes her this weird, quirky figure throughout the book, and I just wasn't that impressed. It just felt like it lacked any real nuance to it. I also wasn't necessarily that impressed with Eli and his obsessive infatuation with Lilia and following her to Montreal. I don't know, just the whole relationship mostly seemed built on obsession, more than anything more deep than that. It was kind of interesting following him and Michaela around Montreal, but again, it was all surface level, just like, oh, well, this is, two quirky characters talking, but meh, I don't know. Nothing was really much deeper than this mysterious plot of trying to unravel what happened to Lilia, which I think Mandel might have been more interested in than I was. So that's basically my thoughts about this book, and really what interested me the most was those parallels to the questions that seem to be dogging her in Station 11 about what it means to disappear, what it means to lose your history, both as an individual and as a society. It just works so much better in Station 11, which I guess is kind of crazy because Mandel had to basically completely destroy the world. Whereas here, it just felt like these characters were just too quirky, and their motivations to me didn't make sense in the real world, or at least they weren't fleshed out enough for it to make sense to me. So that's where I'm ending. So I feel like I'm ending on a downer note here, but instead I guess I will talk about the fact that Mandel is coming out with her first new book post Station 11 in 2020 in March. It's called The Glass House, and I'm incredibly intrigued. I'm intrigued about how much she's going to return to form, as it were, and I'm also intrigued by how much she's going to be influenced by the spike of fame she got after Station 11, because for my understanding, these 3 books didn't really garner her much acclaim, but Station 11 went off the map. So I'm kind of hoping that she finds a happy medium, not to, just keep repeating Station 11, but to take some of that inspiration forward with her into her future. And that about wraps it up for me. Now all I have to do is wrap up some August reading that I'll just be talking about in Friday Reads rather than making huge videos about, and moving on into September. Like a vault. I can't believe it's almost September already. Yeesh. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope all of you who love Station 11, or also who read these books and had opinions on them, found this to be interesting. And I will see you next time.